All right, good afternoon or good day, everybody. We are going to get started in just a moment, so stand by while we wait for a critical mass of attendees to filter into the room.
Awesome.
This is going to be a record book for us with the fifth webinar that we have hosted now. I think I'm correct with number 5 at S3 Collective, and we crested 100 registrants, so very excited for folks' enthusiasm and interest. I think we're about at critical mass, so we're 2 minutes in. Let's kick off. Hey, everybody. David Valancourt, good to see you all. I'm sure there are many familiar faces in the audience. I'm the board chair and co-founder of the S3 Collective. Super excited to have this webinar series here about amplifying medical voices. We bring a different cross-section of experts from across the medical community, everything from patients, scientists to today physicians. And I am super excited to have our panelists here. I will actually be hopping off because I am playing double duty today as moderator, but we have, as always, our amazing Leaf 411 ambassador, Mo Dube Savage here that will run this amazing webinar. Before I hand it over to Mo, just a couple of housekeeping items. This episode, as all, are recorded and will be available on demand. This is for you all, everybody here in the audience. We do this for you. So this is an amazing opportunity to put the experts in the hot seat and ask them questions. So we've got 1 hour and we will save time for Q&A. So as your ideas pop up, open up the Q&A function, put those questions in there, and Mo will do her best to get to everyone's. We've definitely had issues in the past where we've had too many questions, so anything that we can't get to, we will follow up with afterwards and in the recap email. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Mo to make some introductions.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for being here. We're kicking off the year to amplify the medical patient voice. I would definitely like to start by acknowledging and thanking all those people. We're talking about advocacy today, but we have two leaders in that, but we also have every single person who has spoken their voice, shown up in places where cannabis is not normal or accepted, because they have been holding up this plant from the beginning of time, especially through debilitating prohibition years and those that were wrongfully harmed by exercising their right to consume this plant. So we honor and see you. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Maureen Dubé Savage. I'm a dietitian and holistic cannabis educator. I am working with the national nurse nonprofit Leaf 411. We are a public health service of a national nurse guidance call line. We also provide education services to professionals, industry, and the community. I am going to pop the full bios in the chat of our two esteemed guests, but please connect with them. They're open and willing to have these conversations, especially if you're not in circles. We can bring you into circles, just like the Association of Cannabis Clinicians and the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. There's a place to better understand this industry, the plant from a medical patient voice. So I'll drop those in. So we are going to start here with Dr. Hergen Rather. He is the past president or current president, 50 years in medicine, but longstanding co-founder with the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. He started out as an ER physician and providing early access to cannabis to patients. And his longstanding focus has been on autism, epilepsy, cancer, and degenerative diseases. We're going to start with a presentation from Dr. Hergen Rather, and then after that, we will hear from Dr. Jordan Tischler, who is our president of the Association of Cannabis Specialists. So let's hand it over to you, Dr. Hergen Rather. Would love to hear about your journey.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. I have a slide set that I wanted to follow along. More or less, this is the same set that I presented at the third annual SEC meeting in Denver in the fall. So I'm going to click over to that. I'll share my screen and hopefully it'll all come into view for you.
While you get that pulled up, which looks like we're good, I'm going to jump off and say goodbye and thank you to everybody. And before I do, I just want to acknowledge I wish we could have all physicians and clinicians that work in the healthcare space involved in cannabis here today, but we can't, of course, there's only so much time and resources. So I do want to give a special shout out to organizations like Doctors for Drug Policy Reform for a lot of their work and recognizing that we have so many great organizations, two of which are here today, that no matter where you are in the marketplace, join them, support them because they need it and they're doing the hard work. So thank you to Doctors Drug Policy Reform, SCC, and ACS, and others that I know are out there for this great work. Back to you, Jeff. Thanks for
Thank
letting me
you.
interject.
Sure. Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to start off by simply saying that some of this is past history that many of you are already well familiar with. I have a couple images of bottles of medicine that were in common use early in the 20th century. They have, fallen out of use after the Stamp Act came in 1937. So I'm trying to keep moving those slides for some reason there. Okay, next slide. Just some more of these medicines that were used in the 19th and 20th century. This was in common usage, and some of them were powders, some of them were tinctures, some of them were pills. They were all cannabis extracts, and they were used for everything from corns on your feet to epilepsies and anxiety and mood disorders, certainly chronic pain, many things that cannabis was being used for on a regular basis. Moving to the next slide. This all turned when Harry Anslinger left the prohibition of alcohol and came into Washington with the idea that he would end the use of cannabis for a variety of reasons that are political and not really well educated. He was a kind of a crazy racist that got some traction with the Anslinger, with the Hearst Press, and he crafted the Marijuana Tax Act and worked around the halls of Congress for a couple years. During that time, Fiorello LaGuardia moved from being a congressman to the mayor of New York City, and very likely that just gave Anslinger more room to have his way with the prohibition of cannabis. LaGuardia knew that people were using cannabis on a regular basis in New York City and were not having problems with it. So it was a real setback when he was gone and Anslinger pushed on to get the Tax Act in place. The kinds of warnings that people were given were that this was going to cause murder, insanity, and death. Just crazy things that were unfounded, but it made Congress people followed his lead and came to speak to congressional hearing in 1937. Cannabis medicines were swept up in this anti-marijuana by analysts. Woodward pled with Congress to oppose the Stamp Act and reject the erroneous claims by Anslinger because yeah, there was a number of making the possession and sale of cannabis or marijuana illegal in the United States. The act imposed a tax that was on the sale of cannabis and required anyone involved in its importation, cultivation, possession, special tax. promote and really use cannabis medicine. That's what in Denver, uh, the man in the area, uh, and just don't go there if you want to stay out of prison. Prohibitive. Uh, incensed by the assertions of he knew that it wasn't causing criminal behaviors and juvenile delinquency, and he knew it wasn't physically addictive, and he realized it really wasn't a gateway drug to more dangerous drugs. So he personally commissioned the New York Academy of Medicine to study the assertions, the bigoted and racist assertions of Anslinger. And 6 years later, this New York Academy of Medicine committee report contradicted all of the claims of Anslinger and the U.S. Department of Treasury. But in spite of that, the prohibition was on, and it didn't really gain much traction. In fact, it said that Anslinger went around and bought up or acquired most of the printed copies of the New York Academy of Medicine's findings and made them really unavailable for view by the so with Dr. Todd McAree, who was born in Pennsylvania, educated in Oregon for his 62. He was cannabis and wanted to study it, so he eventually became a psychiatrist and an addiction specialist. The national and was assigned to a position of research. He'd collect English language of marijuana's use from 1839 until 1972. 1839 is when uh, uh, I'll show you the picture and just move on to that. Uh, oops, sorry. When Brooke O'Shaughnessy had gone from I'm well known in the UK. Uh, uh, sorry about that. He took all of his papers that he had collected, and because the National Institute of Mental Health was not interested in his work, he self-published those papers in 1973. And it's kind of a collector's item now to have a copy of that, but all of those papers are available. So the National Academy of Sciences went on, I'm sorry, the National Institute of Mental Health had other plans for McAree. So basically, they sent McAree to California to investigate the hippies of the era in the 60s to see what their use of cannabis was doing. They were interested in perceived it as a clear and imminent danger to the national security. It became clear to McAree that the NIMH was really only interested in his investigation to look for negative effects of cannabis and nothing about an honest therapeutic effect of cannabis that he had found in his research. So McAree went on to really feel more allied with the hippies of California than with his NIMH colleagues. So he quit NIMH and moved on to California, where he continued his education. And he completed residency, a psychiatry residency, and began his medical practice primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area. He worked in alcohol and substance abuse clinics and private psychiatry practice. In the 90s, he began to do intake medical evaluations for people that were selling cannabis illegally in cannabis buyers clubs. There was, he was very, he problems, worked with these particular in Cisco, looking at the reasons.
Okay, I think we might have did we just lose the um Dr. Herman rather? Sorry about that. Oh, maybe he's coming back. His connection is coming from Maui and hoping that he can come back to us. Do we have you there? There you go.
Oh,
Yeah, you're in and out,
I'm
Dr.
back.
Herman Rather. Yeah. Do you want to try to
Well,
continue?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
McCorea's research files, his clinical notes, his writings, correspondence, his subject files, his reprints, business documents, graphs and newspaper clippings, all of his memorabilia ended up at the National Library of Medicine, organized into 137 boxes of material and a map drawer to assist for individuals exploring and understanding cannabis. Yeah, sorry about that lapse. The reception out here in the countryside in Maui is not that strong. So Todd's close friends and allies included Dennis Perone and Mary Brownie Mary. That's Mary Rathman. Dennis was a Vietnam veteran, and was repeatedly arrested for selling marijuana to AIDS victims. He launched the San Francisco Cannabis Buyers Club in response to the AIDS epidemic. Todd took histories from hundreds of members of that club and a club in Hayward as well. That's Dennis on the far right, Mary Rathman, and there's Todd in the middle taking a history from a patient.
Dr. Herman Rather, we don't see your slides right now, but I think that we would rather hear your story because the audio is in and out. And
Yeah.
then we can talk later if we can share the slide deck with the recording. But we would much rather hear your story.
Okay.
And I think with your connection, that's going to be the best way to do it.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
sorry. Slides
Yeah,
aren't.
no, that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks for this. We're just adjusting as we need to, but your story is really the importance. So keep it going. We'd love to hear it.
Do you have my image or what's there for you now?
Your just your face image, not your sharing screen,
Okay.
not your
Well,
slide deck. Yeah. But we
okay.
can now hear you very clear, which is
Do
important.
you want me to click on share screen and see if it comes right back up?
Yeah, and I will it does. Yep. So
Okay.
hopefully we
Well,
can
I'll tell the
continue
story
to
as we move
hear
along.
you. Very good.
So Dennis Perone and Gail Geringer and William Panzer, an attorney in the Bay Area, Todd McCrea, and others drafted a ballot initiative called Proposition 215 in 1995 and 6. And this was put before the voters by a ballot initiative. And to the surprise of the state officials, the proposition passed with a surprising margin of like 56% of the vote. Had been that ended about a 70-year prohibition on the use of cannabis. The DA in San Francisco, Terrence Hallinan, was the only California district attorney who supported Prop 215 because he knew of the work of Dennis and was very familiar with the AIDS epidemic as it was in California. So here's a picture of Perone on the election night celebrating the victory. Uh, that didn't end things at all. Our California Attorney General Barry McCaffrey went back to Washington, D.C., where he and uh, I'm sorry, Barry McCaffrey was the the czar of the drug czar in Washington, D.C. under then President. He uh, found himself at odds with Dan Lindgren, who was the Attorney General in California. Barry McCaffrey, Janet Reno, that was the U.S. Attorney General, NIDA Director, Alan Leshner, the Department of Health and Human Services, Donna Shalala, who you may know was holding the patent for cannabis as a neuroprotectant. So doctors were warned that they would lose their DEA licenses, effectively losing their ability to practice medicine if they chose to approve any patients, as per the California law. McCaffrey targeted Mikaria on TV as practicing Cheech and Chong medicine. They vilified him. They showed a list of conditions in the CNN breaking news story, allegedly Todd's list, that was fabricated with a number of laughable conditions with intent to discredit Todd. So here's the image on right off the TV. They show this list of conditions, and it was just laughable. And Todd came back like a day later with, "Whose list is this?" You'll see in the side note, "Not mine," and his signature. So the actual list of conditions that Todd was encouraging doctors to consider when they were approving cannabis use in California was this list, and it included some of those things, but many others. So Todd stood up against them, and in spite of being vilified and really losing his license by the California Medical Board, he knew that physicians needed an organization dedicated to cannabis education and legal support, choosing to practice cannabinoid medicine. Well, not many docs were comfortable practicing cannabis medicine under the pressure from the feds and the state licensing board. So he also knew that doctors needed a source of information, a medical journal. So O'Shaughnessy's was formed under the guise of Fred Gardner, who was a reporter and supporting Todd's work. So Fred Gardner is really what I would call a principal source of information for the cannabis movement. He was a confidant of Todd's. He was the co-founder of SEC in 1999. He wrote O'Shaughnessy's papers that were given free to doctors. I'm sorry, free to patients, as long as they would buy them for $1 from Fred. He would and give them away. That was the deal. So Fred was a Harvard graduate, an editor of Scientific American, and an editor of the Synapse magazine at UCSF, and a publicist in Terrence Hellinan's DA office. He was a good friend of Dennis Peron. This is just a stack of those papers at the printer in San Francisco. Again, if they bought them for $1 and promised to give them free to patients, that was the deal. And people for years received these free issues of O'Shaughnessy's. Fred went on to prior to this time, he opened a coffee house in 1969 in Columbia, South Carolina. And he found that the GIs were really looking for a place to just kibbutz with people about the anti-war movement. He found that they were feeling rebellious, and they were feeling like they didn't want to have anything to do with the military, but they had to be very careful. So he, in founding this coffee house, he was able to really work with the GIs in this effort. And it was not long before GIs were taking to the street, not wanting to fight in another rich man's war, as the banner shows. So these were active GIs standing up against the war in Vietnam. On the last night of the San Francisco Buyers Club existence, Fred on the left there sang songs to Dennis Peron. These included The War on Plants and The Ballad of Dennis Peron. Very important information. This is in 1999 when Fred and Mikaria founded the California Cannabis Research Medical Group, along with uh, his physician sister, Beverly, and another psychiatrist in the Bay Area, Richard Hansen. So there's those signatures in founding this organization. Fred Gardner then told the story. He went to International Cannabinoid Research Society meetings around the world. They alternated between Europe and North America, and he told the story, and it's all in print. So, what was the reason for the SCC? It was a nonprofit organization. It was organized not for any private gain by any individuals as a nonprofit public benefit corporation. Specific purposes for which the corporation are known were it was to provide cannabis approvals to people in the public of any age group, which was allowed in California law. The idea was to provide medical research and medical services and to then evaluate the data and look at the clinical benefits of cannabis. And to some degree, that has continued to be the case for the SCC, although research, as you all know, has been very limited because of the limitations by federal law. This gets into some of the real details of what it was like being a physician. Again, Todd was ridiculed. His license was suspended by the California Medical Board only from complaints of law enforcement. A fake SEC website was set up probably by the federal government. We don't really know, but it was to confuse people and take them in loops or into other sites. The California Medical Board removed the medical license from Dr. Mike Alcalay when he started treating a kid with epilepsy before he actually saw the patient live. That was the only reason for removing his license. They imprisoned Dr. Molly Fry for providing cannabis that needed it and couldn't afford it. She grew it on site of her clinic, Poole, California. They imprisoned Terrell Brown until he died in prison for his errors in opioid prescribing. He was also a cannabis approving physician. Federal agents infiltrated the practice of Dr. Philip Denny, who was the SCC's president in 2007. The California Med Board demanded that Dr. Frank Lucido, another one of our initial members, they asked him to turn over the patient's records on a minor who was using cannabis for migraine. He refused to do that, and eventually the state Supreme Court told the medical board to back off, and he didn't have any obligation to show records. They also suspended the license of Dr. Hanya Barth, another one of our early members. Her minor patient was a depressed kid, and he found that cannabis was the best thing that he could use for it. When his psychiatrist, a UC psychiatrist, found that he was using cannabis, he insisted that he stop using cannabis and prescribed an SSRI to him. Thereafter, the kid committed a suicide. Hanya Barth was blamed for the suicide, and her license went into suspension for a couple years until she got it back again. The California Attorney General brought charges of murder against Frank Fisher when his patient had an approved patient get involved in a motor vehicle accident. There was a death in the accident, and Fisher, the physician, was charged with murder for that accident. So it took years and years before that was eventually cleared, but eventually he was exonerated. So, sorry, this is jumping all over the place. Basically, I'm down to the thank you at the end of the slide set. So the founders really endured lots of assaults on them individually over those early years. And it was these many brave physicians, some of them shown in images here with their stories, but they stood up and said, look, we are comfortable with the use of cannabis. There aren't many people that go through medical training these days and feel that kind of comfort in stepping out and saying, well, I want to do this. I know cannabis has medical uses, and I'm willing to take the risk of being vilified by the state. But people did. And so I'm going to end my slide set at this point and stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Mo.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Hergenrather, and really highlighting, some of the history many of us know. But when I heard your presentation at SEC, really being able to highlight their faces, their names. Some of them we obviously know, but others we don't. And they were really working every day within their own practice. But then as we hear, I mean, licensing taken away, charges being drawn to you, that risk we are absolutely indebted to, along with all other prohibitionist activists to put themselves out there and because we know the plant works and again doing no harm for your patients and giving them all these opportunities of new tools is the role of a healthcare provider. So I hope you got as much out of it, the audience, as I did. And thank you for the advocacy and anyone who is out there putting themselves on the line. But the physicians that did that, uh, active risk, right, of really just still practicing, even though there was heat behind them, so to speak. Thank you again for that sharing. All right, we are going to hear from Dr. Jordan Tischler. If we want to switch over and let's hear about what you've been doing, Dr. Tischler, and your work in amplifying the medical patient voice.
Well, thank you. Can you see the slides, everybody?
Yes, thank you. Beautiful.
Yes.
Fantastic. So, I want to start by saying thank you to Dr. Hergenrather, who's somebody I've known for quite some time, and also to the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. I think that he has given us a tremendous wealth of information and history of advocacy on patients' behalf over the years. And I will say that relatively speaking, a newcomer to this field. I've only been in this field for about 15 years. And the Association of Cannabinoid Specialists, which is a group that I founded, is similarly on the newer side of things. And so rather than talking particularly about the history that Dr. Hergenrather has covered so wonderfully and completely, I'm going to talk more about our organization and our intentions or desires for the future of patient care. Just in the history, you can kind of see our little skeptical baby picture up here on the right. This is sort of informs a whole lot of where we're coming from. Back in the day when I started this, there were no dispensaries in my home state of Massachusetts. I actually was working for the VA hospital as an emergency room physician, and tried to get the federal government and the VA interested in this kind of medicine, which then prompted an investigation into me, which went all the way up to the chief counsel in DC, who thankfully said, well, whatever he does on his own time is fine, but we're not interested. So I had formed my private practice, which was called Inhale MD. And then shortly after that, when I saw a need, formed the Association of then Cannabis Specialists. Now we are the Association of Cannabinoid Specialists, trying to broaden our scope a little bit. And our mission is fairly straightforward. I think we are here to ensure the highest standards in the practice of cannabis medicine, safeguarding patient care with clinical best practices, and interface with other stakeholders in the cannabis community, as we're doing this evening. We believe that patients are uniquely vulnerable and have different needs from those of the recreational users. We provide evidence and experience-based education for patients, cannabis clinicians, referring clinicians, and to lawmakers to help them understand cannabis or cannabinoid medicine and make informed decisions We are a political organization, or a policy organization would be a better statement, striving to implement best practices in the laws and regulations at the federal, state, and international levels. Our core values really, I think, reflect many of those that that Dr. Hergenrather has mentioned, and really pave demonstrate our view of the road forward. So again, we believe that patients are a vulnerable group who deserve the highest standards of medical care. That recreational or non-medical use is simply not the same as medical use. And these groups have different goals, both of which are absolutely legitimate, but their needs need to be addressed separately. The prohibition of cannabis is a major public health hazard and has failed to decrease drug use and has led to unsupportable consequences. Cannabis is medicine, and it should be regulated like other medicines and be available by prescription. And I know that that may be viewed as a bit of a controversial statement, and I'm happy to talk about that later. We also believe that cannabis products should not be making unsubstantiated medical claims, and that products should be required to meet strict state standards for safety, bioavailability, and efficacy. Lastly, we believe that dispensaries should operate similar to pharmacies. They should provide products that are safe and effective. They should not provide medical advice to patients, and they certainly should not be contradicting the patient's clinician's orders. This is just a picture slide. This is basically why we do this. And I think that if you look at the children, the older folks, you can really get an idea of what gets us to do this and to put ourselves on the line as we have been discussing with Dr. Hergenrather. Just as a general overview of what we've been up to, we've got about 7,000 members internationally. This includes a whole bunch of countries in addition to the United States, including Canada, Britain, Germany, Spain, Israel, Panama, Colombia, Australia, and a number of other countries. I often jokingly say that we don't have anybody as a member in Antarctica right now, but we're working on those pesky penguins. We provide continuing medical education. We have an AMA accredited CME activity called the Introduction to Cannabinoid Medicine. And then we have a list of 10 other courses that are deeper dives on specific topics, things like cannabis testing, evaluating sources of evidence, cannabis and its interaction with anesthesia, what we know about CBD, terpenes, minor cannabinoids, other secondary compounds that are found in cannabis, drug interactions, cannabis and gastroenterology, and cannabis and OBGYN. Additional resources, God, I misspelled that. So forgive me for the misspelling, but additional resources include a bud tender training course that is specifically focused on aspects of bud tender activities that are not typically thought of in dispensary training. So how to interface with patients, how to interface with clinicians, how to explain dosing and those sorts of things. We have a handbook of cannabis therapeutics that is focused for clinicians on, if I am sitting with a patient who has X, Y, or Z, how do I think about this and how do I start the medical therapeutics for them? We do monthly online symposia on a range of topics, some of which are aimed at clinicians, others are aimed at students. Some of them are more policy oriented, others are more clinically oriented. And then we provide a clinical resource library, which we maintain essentially 2 to 3 critical foundational studies in specific areas of cannabinoid medicine, either in terms of efficacy or risk mitigation. As mentioned, we're a policy organization as well. So we have provide policy initiatives to the US federal government in the form of agencies, including FDA, DEA, and HHS. I didn't mention that we have also testified to Congress a number of times. And then, of course, we provide similar support to state government and agencies in states that include Massachusetts, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, as well as Arizona, Missouri, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Hawaii, and a few others as well. Trying not to make that a boring and exhaustive list. If one wants to become a member, first of all, I should say that our membership fee is a pay what you can sort of membership. We don't want anyone not to be a member simply for financial reasons. These then provides an array of free educational resources, online access to previous symposia, the handbooks that I've mentioned, the clinical reference library that I mentioned, a discounted subscription to a peer-reviewed international journal called Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research, discounted pricing on educational coursework that I've mentioned, membership pricing on ACS meetings and event, both live and virtual, and of course, the advocacy representation on cannabis-related issues at federal and local levels. And then we also have an ongoing networking and mentoring series that I think is probably the thing that I personally like most of all. So hopefully amongst those, that long list, there's something that you find will be of benefit and interest to you. The ways that you can get involved are numerous. The first, of course, would be to join. And as I mentioned, it's a pay what you can membership. Then, of course, we would love it if any of you would like to volunteer. We have a range of departments that include things like policy, education, student, informatics. I'm sure I'm forgetting others. And all of these departments need help getting their daily mission accomplished. So please consider volunteering. Spread the word. This is about making sure that everybody hears the message. And the message is we need to take care of patients properly. So become an ambassador, help us reach out to clinicians, help us reach out to lawmakers. And this is not simply in the United States. In fact, we have a specific ambassador program aimed at non-USA ambassadors. And then, of course, as Dr. Hergenrather can attest, we are all C3 type organizations. And so donations are important in order to support the mission. And certainly we look mostly toward the corporate world for that, but we always need some help in finding those willing donors. So just to summarize, we believe that the future is to make cannabis more and more like a medicine, so that we can take proper care of our patients and provide them with both safe and efficacious medication, and that we are doing this through outreach on a national and international level, as well as with the states, and that the benefits include the advocacy, education, networking, and events, and that you can learn far more about this than I can spew out in a few minutes if you want to visit our website, which is www.cannaspecialist.org. And with that, and because I'm a little breathless, I'm going to relinquish the floor and look forward to answering your questions.
Absolutely. Stay right with this because since you're right on, let's talk about this. Appreciate all the resources that both SEC and ACS have for us. So many nonprofits and health professional organizations are out there. Start digging, reach out to any of us to find what's the right fit for you. And as we are hearing from your story and from Jeff's story of the 70s and beyond, working through those risks, right? When you went to organizations, right, we know that you're risking your licensure, reputation, as we heard, criminal exposure, and even professional isolation. I've definitely noticed that both personal isolation, right, that we've all been stigmatized for promoting this plan as a health tool, as a wellness tool. But tell me a little bit more about like how did you work through to get the, say, naysayer or someone who was apprehensive, like your colleague or the hospital administrators or maybe even regulators? Like what motivated you and what were some tools? How did you get them to better understand what you were doing?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I will say that I've had the advantage of living in the Northeast, where by and large, my colleagues have been perhaps ignorant, but generally, open-minded. Certainly, as I mentioned, I started this while I was working for the VA, and they were interested but absolutely constrained, and so were my other home institutions, that being the Harvard hospitals. And so what I ended up doing was starting a private practice so that I could provide the care that patients needed, but then turning right around and going back to all of those hospitals and presenting them with evidence. And I grew up in a very academic background, and we're going into hospitals where I was known, at least from my prior association, and I could go in there and show them data. And when I started, people like Mrs. Clinton were running around saying things like, "Well, medical cannabis is a lovely idea, but there are no data," right? And so if you went back in time to say 2012 and you put the word cannabis into PubMed, which is the Google for science, right? You would get 25,000 studies. Turns out that cannabis is the most studied substance on the planet. The problem is not there are no data. The problem are that there's so much data that it's very hard to kind of figure out what to do with it and to make it make sense. And so when I was going back into the hospitals, this is what I was telling people. And then I was giving them talks that distilled the information into a usable form. And that really became the beginning of the association. And quite frankly, I think if we continue to go out there with the data that we have and the data that are coming in, and we're really intellectually rigorous and honest, meaning we can say, this is what we know works. This is what we know are the side effects. This is what we know are the risks, right? Because it is not risk-free, even though it's often painted that way. And this is what we don't know. Medical folk will accept that, at least by and large. That is to say, if you're being honest and even-handed. And so I think that that has been a major um, uh, uh, tool for getting the message across.
Wonderful. Appreciate that. Absolutely bringing out data, educating, and combating what they're actually saying are the holdups, right? The blocks, and then actually addressing that. How about for yourself, Dr. Hergen, rather, kind of what were some tools, tactics, motivation to go up against naysayers, especially when it was coming to, questioning your professional judgment, your professional, you know, outlook. Do we still have you here, Jeff?
Yes, I am
Here
here.
we go. Yeah. What do you
Um,
think? How did you push through that and help colleagues really? Your
okay.
kumbaya of that was a very heated time as they still are today.
It's true. If you can turn on my video, that would be appreciated. I
I
see.
can.
All right, then let me try that. All right, I should be there. Uh, when the law first changed, I found my colleague physicians at the hospital that I worked in were a bit angry about how California made an end run around the doctors, as if they should be the ones to determine the safety and efficacy of using cannabis, which they knew nothing about really, other than what the federal government had been preaching, and that was not very useful. But as always, it's really the patients, the people who are trying and using cannabis that are reporting about the benefits of using cannabis. So I'm just, that still is the way it works. So as I continue in my practice, I find, people will come to me and say, I want to use cannabis and try it for the condition I'm dealing with, whether it's dementia or pain or seizures or whatever. But they'll say, but I don't want to get high. Well, this is the education of a cannabinoid physician is to say, there are ways around this. First of all, start slowly and gradually increase dosing, and you'll find that you can tolerate it. The autoregulation of the CB1 cannabinoid receptors in the brain is follows daily use of cannabis. So people can end up using really substantial doses of cannabis with time, and that it just takes gradually increasing the dose in order to meet their therapeutic goals. So I really look at it not, well, of course I try to educate doctors, and I have been invited to speak in grand rounds and other opportunities, and some get it, and by and large, many don't. The signal is mixed.
Oh no.
Bummer, bummer. I know. Oh, the pearls to be living in. Oh, here he comes. He's in and out like the waves of Hawaii.
Right. There you go.
Lucky him.
And,
Keep
and
going, Jeff. We hear you.
okay. So, I like working with the patients, and I like working with those that are responsible for patient care, like, the people who run these uh facilities, like the residential care facilities for the elderly. They are so delighted to have somebody knowledgeable who is willing to work with them and make the adjustments. And what I do in working with patients is start off by saying the first recommendation I give to you is probably very likely not going to be what we will find is best for you. We're going to have to continue to make adjustments.
Hmm. There we go. Personalization is key in cannabis therapeutics. And that's why
I would
hand
just
guidance.
add to that
Yeah,
that personalization and adjustment is true of all medications. If somebody
here,
puts
here.
you on a blood pressure medication, the likelihood is it's not going to be the right dose and it may not even be the right agent by the time you've kind of gone down that path a little bit. And so follow-up is a crucial element of all medicine, including and especially cannabis medicine.
Yeah. Hand-to-hand
Yeah,
guidance,
that's
as
true.
always. Absolutely. Well, tell me more.
Yes.
Since we
Are,
still have you,
are
Jeff.
you,
Yeah. Tell us a little bit
okay,
more about the
good.
yeah, we gotcha. Like the CMEs around education for our physicians, right? Um, we know that it is a valid certification. American Nurses Association identified that. Where are the holdups with medical acknowledging this as a true medical requirement, really?
Well, that's a good point. And there are those that are working against this eventuality, I'll call it, because I think eventually this will become better and eased. But right now we are still dealing with this. Without mentioning names, there are people who go from state licensing board to other state licensing boards, and not only are discouraging the use of cannabis, but are saying that doctors, if they are using cannabis.
Oh, lost him again.
That's really too bad.
Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead, Dr. Tischler. What have you found in regards to getting clinicians up to date?
Well, I think that part of it is always just reaching them, right? I mean, one of the things that we're as a movement are failing to acknowledge is that clinicians now, particularly in the United States, where the insurance companies kind of rule the roost, right? They don't have a lot of time on their hands. And certainly they might be interested in learning about cannabis medicine, but that's a difficult proposition. And so we work hard to make this easy for them and to provide it to them in a way that is well documented, easy to take in, and also has immediate applications in their clinic. And I think going back to a previous statement, it's also very important for us to acknowledge the warts, if you will, because that kind of a broad, encompassing perspective fits well with clinicians who are always trained to be skeptical of things that's outside their wheelhouse. And so we really have to be able to demonstrate that kind of benefit. And I think that, it's important for us to acknowledge that, in fact, sometimes cannabis use, whether it's medical or more commonly non-medical, can go awry. And so being able to, educate clinicians both about its benefits and also how to deal with patients who may be using cannabis for whatever reason in the primary care setting, how to identify them when this is becoming problematic, and then giving them tools to help that patient so that it's not just, yeah, cannabis is great, but really cannabis can be good for these sorts of things. And these are the constrained ways that we use it to maximize benefit and minimize risk. And here's what we do if things go sideways, either in that medical or non-medical intention.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, patients are driving
No,
this for sure, have that as they have from the beginning of time, because when something works, then you're pursuing that whether your doctor says it or not. But it would be much better when we say, speak with your, clinicians and physicians. I'm changing that up to say, share with your physicians and clinicians, not ask them. And then also reach out, find resources to find cannabis clinicians through SEC or ACS, because that's like an argument that you shouldn't be working with as a patient. You should share what works for you, and you have the right to use this plant as your medicine, right? And so I think patients are definitely pushing this agenda onto physicians, and we hope that that keeps on going and that physicians are listening and reaching out to the resources that are already available there.
I
Absolutely.
totally
It,
agree. And I appreciate the tag team with Jordan on my poor connection here, but it is very important that patients do speak to their doctors and let them know what they're getting from this. It's the doctors have it's changing gradually, but it definitely is changing. Where we used to have docs saying that's dangerous, it's addictive, don't do it. And now it's, well, it might be more like, well, if you're really getting those benefits, I'm not going to get involved personally, but keep doing what you're doing. I got the note from my 10th year anniversary of my one of my GBM patients, glioblastoma multiforme brain tumor. And
mm,
she just notified me that she's 10 years tumor free and continuing to use cannabis. So,
beautiful.
these kinds of reports push us on to say, this is really important and valuable in doing things that aren't being met by other conventional medicine modalities. So,
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I'm just,
The
yeah,
patients do
glad to.
their outcomes, their positive outcomes, their quality of life, whether the disease state is, gone or not, but the quality of life always comes with cannabis therapeutics, and that's what does keep us going. As we're finishing out, we'll start with you, Jeff. One piece of advice to amplify the medical patient voice to our audience
Boy, that's hard to do in a sentence.
is
I'm
speak out, right? Share your
Yeah, it
story.
is speak out and don't judge before you really have walked in those shoes. A lot of people vilify cannabis and they hit a point in their years and they just now they have problems and now they have degenerative diseases and chronic pain and other conditions and that often is finally what turns their opinion around.
Absolutely. Dr.
Yeah,
Tischler?
speak the truth.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that just as we've been talking about, it's about sharing your story with the clinicians because it impresses upon them how important this progress is. But I would also say, join our organizations to help us push this out there so that we can, reach these docs and other clinicians and provide them with that kind of data and guidance. I think that one of the things we've often forget is there are a lot of Americans who use cannabis in one form or another, but there is a much like five times greater number of Americans who have conditions that would benefit from cannabis, but they're not aware of cannabis. They're not interested in it. They're still thinking it's the devil's lettuce, and they're not going to do anything that their primary care or other doctor doesn't agree with. So we need to reach mainstream physiciandom because we want to reach those patients, but the physicians become the gatekeeper. So we have to educate them so that we can then get those people the benefits that we all know are available.
Absolutely. Well, we are wrapping up at the top of the hour. Thanks for those that are staying with us. Gratitude to everyone on this call, everyone who's speaking the truth on this plant and doing their part. We all, as Leaf 411, S3 Collective, SCC, and ACS, we are all nonprofits working here mostly as volunteers to move this mission. So any small contributions make a big ripple. And we thank anyone who sponsors any of our organizations because it does help us do the work. Well, today's will be a recording, and we will have that out to you for those that have registered, and it'll be available online. And our next event is February 18th at noon. It's a Wednesday, and we are going to be talking with a former regulator and a pharmacist in regards to how we bring stability into the marketplace with standardizations and safe testings and checking the checks. So I hope you can join us again. So thanks again to everyone for being here and your patience with the recording and all your work you do. Peace to you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mo and
Thank you.
David and Jordan.
Absolutely. Take care.
Wonderful to
Bye.
see you, Jeff. Take care.
Thank you.